Valera Core did not simply enter a battlefield, she dismantled it. The perimeter of the mining colony on Sector 4 was a jagged scar of burning refined ore and shattered durasteel. Smoke plumed upward in thick, choking columns that blotted out the twin moons above, turning the night into a suffocating gray haze. To Valera, the chaos was not blinding. It was a map. Every explosion was a rhythmic beat, and every scream of a dying thruster was a note in the song she had been engineered to conduct. She moved through the smoke with the fluid, terrifying grace of a predator that had evolved beyond the need for stealth. Her armor, a sleek second skin of matte black biocomposite, hummed with a low resonance that vibrated in her bones. It was not just protection, it was an extension of her nervous system. 3 insurgent mechs, bulky and crude machines welded together from mining equipment, lumbered around the corner of a collapsed supply depot. Their sensors swept the debris field, looking for the Dominion squad that was supposed to be pinned down. They did not see Valera until she was already airborne. She launched herself off a vertical slab of concrete, her powerful legs driving her upward with force that cracked the stone beneath her boots. She was a blur of motion, a shadow detaching itself from the dark. As she descended, she drew her twin vibro blades. They ignited with a hiss, glowing a pale, lethal violet. Valera landed on the center mech. The metal groaned under the impact. Before the pilot could engage the turret, she drove both blades down through the chassis, severing the primary hydraulic coupling. Fluid sprayed out in a high-pressure jet. She did not pause to watch it fall. She vaulted off the collapsing machine, twisting in the air to face the second target. The second mech swung a heavy industrial claw at her. Valera ducked under the swing, the wind of it whipping the sensory tendrils on her helmet. She stepped inside the guard, moving faster than the machine's servos could track. With a precise surgical slash, she cut the power conduits at the mech's knee joint. The machine buckled, toppling sideways with a thunderous crash. The third insurgent panicked. He opened fire with a scatter cannon, spraying the area with superheated shrapnel. Valera did not retreat. She danced. She wove through the hail of fire, her movements efficient and minimalistic. A twist of her hip let a shard of metal pass by inches. A duck of her head avoided a fatal blow. She closed the distance in 3 heartbeats. When she reached the final machine, she did not strike the pilot. She struck the weapon itself, slicing the cannon barrel in half. The backfire exploded the weapon, sending the mech stumbling backward into a ravine. Silence fell over the sector, broken only by the crackle of fires and the distant whine of sirens. Valera holstered her blades. She stood amidst the wreckage, her breathing steady, her pulse barely elevated. A notification chimed in her ear. "Sector secured," the automated voice said. She removed her helmet, shaking out her braided silver hair. The air smelled of ozone and victory. It was a scent she loved. But tonight, it felt thin. These insurgents were clumsy. They lacked discipline. They lacked art. She wanted a challenge. The Dominion intelligence vessel orbited the gas giant like a pristine needle of silver light. Inside the briefing room, the air was sterile and cold, recycled too many times. Valera stood at attention, her hands clasped behind her back, looking at the holographic projection floating above the table. The image showed a human male. He had dark, messy hair and eyes that seemed to be looking at something just outside the frame. He wore a heavy coat with a high collar, the kind used by drifters on the frontier worlds. "Target profile," the intelligence officer said. His voice was dry, devoid of inflection. "Name is Jace Hale, former reconnaissance specialist for the Human Coalition. Current status is rogue." Valera studied the face. He looked soft, unremarkable. "What is his crime?" Valera asked. The hologram shifted to show a grainy video feed, a crowded plaza, a podium where a Thoraxi senator was speaking about the new peace treaty, a flash of light from a high window. The senator fell, blue blood spraying across the podium. Panic ensued. Assassination, the officer said. Senator Kalin was the primary architect of the armistice. His death has destabilized the border regions. The human coalition denies involvement, claiming Hale acts alone. We believe he has stolen a classified relic from the senator's private vault, a data core of significant value. Valera narrowed her eyes. Why send me? This looks like a job for a standard enforcement squad. Standard squads have failed, the officer replied. Hale is elusive. He uses human improvisation tactics that our algorithms struggle to predict. He is currently tracked to Carth 9, a disputed world in the neutral zone. Carth 9, Valera repeated. She knew the place. It was a hive of scum, a planet where laws were merely suggestions and credits bought anything, including silence. Your orders are simple, the officer continued. Locate Jace Hale, retrieve the stolen relic, execute the target. This is a clean hunt. Valera, no collateral damage. The peace treaty is hanging by a thread. If the humans think we are sending a war party, the ceasefire breaks. That is why we are sending you alone. Valera felt a spark of interest ignite in her chest. Alone. A hunt in a chaotic city against a target who had already evaded capture. Is he armed? She asked. He prefers kinetic weapons and outdated tech, the officer said, dismissively. But do not underestimate him. He is clever. Valera looked back at the hologram of Jace Hale. She saw the set of his jaw, the way he held himself even in a still image. There was tension there. Alertness. Clever, she whispered to herself. She liked clever. Clever prey ran harder. Clever prey made the victory sweeter. I accept, Valera said, turning away from the table. When do I leave? Immediately. Carth 9 was a sensory assault. Valera stepped off the transport shuttle and was immediately hit by a wall of humidity and noise. The spaceport was a sprawling, rusted labyrinth of docking bays and cargo loaders. Rain fell in a constant, greasy drizzle, slicking the metal walkways and turning the ground into a slurry of mud and oil. Neon signs in a dozen languages flickered overhead, advertising everything from synth noodle stalls to black market cybernetics. The crowd was a dense river of biology. Humans rubbed shoulders with hulking Thoraxi laborers. Small insectoid scavengers darted between legs, clutching scraps of valuable metal. Valera adjusted the collar of her civilian cloak. She wore her combat armor beneath it, the biocomposite plates disguised as standard mercenary gear. But her height and her gait drew eyes. She was tall, even for a Thoraxi, and she moved with a predator's confidence that made the crowd part around her instinctively. She walked toward the lower districts, the area known as the Rust Sprawl. Her intel suggested Hale had been seen purchasing supplies near an old fusion mechanics shop. The streets grew narrower as she descended. The neon lights buzzed louder here, struggling against the gloom. Music thumped from the basements of illegal clubs, a heavy rhythmic bass that shook the puddles on the street. Valera scanned every face, every shadow. Her helmet was folded away in her pack, but her natural senses were sharp. She smelled the fear of a pickpocket who considered approaching her and then thought better of it. She heard the click of a safety being disengaged in a dark alley 3 streets over. She found the mechanic's shop wedged between a noodle bar and a derelict warehouse. The sign above the door was missing half its letters, reading only, Mech Repi. Valera ducked her head to enter. The shop was cluttered with piles of scrap, half-disassembled engines, and tangles of wire hanging from the ceiling like synthetic vines. A small alien slid out from under a hovering chassis. It had 4 arms, large multifaceted eyes, and skin the color of rust. It wiped grease onto a filthy rag. "We are closed," the mechanic chirped. "Come back when the suns are up, or down, whatever time it is. I am looking for a human," Valera said. Her voice was low, cutting through the ambient hum of the shop's generator. The mechanic froze. It looked up at her, blinking its large eyes. Then it let out a chittering laugh. "You and everyone else, tall one," the mechanic said. "Humans are bad business lately. Bad tips, bad attitudes. This human is different," Valera said. She projected a hologram of Jace Hale from her wrist gauntlet. He would have been here 2 days ago, buying power cells, old ones. The mechanic squinted at the blue light. "Oh, him. The one with the sad eyes. Yeah, I remember him. He bought 3 Type 4 fusion cells, the kind they stopped making 50 years ago. I told him they would blow up his converter. He said that was the point." "Did he say where he was going?" The mechanic shrugged with all 4 shoulders. He asked about the old atmospheric processors in Sector 12, the ones that flood when it rains. I told him he was crazy. No one goes there unless they want to drown or get eaten by sewer drakes. Sector 12. It was a ruin, a tangled mess of pipes and flooding sub-basements, a perfect place to hide if you did not mind the smell. Valera deactivated the hologram. "You have been helpful." She placed a credit chip on the workbench. It was enough to buy the shop 3 times over. The mechanic stared at the chip, then back at Valera. Its mandibles clicked. "Hey, you are one of them, aren't you? The Dominion elites. I saw the way you walked in here, like you own the gravity." Valera paused at the door. "I do not own the gravity," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "I just know how to use it." She stepped back out into the rain. Tracking Jace Hale was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. Valera moved toward Sector 12, the rain intensifying until it felt like a curtain of water. She activated her tactical visor, a thin strip of glass that slid over her eyes. The world turned into a wireframe of heat signatures and electrical currents. She found his trail near a drainage outflow. It was faint, a slight thermal residue on a rusted ladder rung where a warm hand had gripped the cold metal. "He is careful," she murmured. She followed the heat ghosts. He moved in erratic patterns, doubling back on himself, crossing deep puddles to hide his tracks. At one point, her sensors picked up a silhouette crouching on a rooftop 2 blocks away. Valera leaped, scaling the side of the building in seconds, only to find a thermal decoy, a simple heating coil wrapped in rags, propped up to look like a man. She crushed the decoy in her fist. He knew he was being hunted. He was playing with her, for the first time in years. Valera felt a flush of genuine irritation mixed with admiration. Most targets ran in straight lines. They panicked. They made mistakes. Jace Hale was treating this city like a chessboard, and he was making her work for every square. She slowed down. If he was using decoys, he was watching. She switched her sensors to passive mode, darkening her armor's energy signature. She became a ghost herself, blending into the rain and the shadows. She moved along the high gantries that crisscrossed the sector, looking down into the maze of alleyways. There, a flicker of movement near a decommissioned water turbine. It was not a decoy. It was a man, moving with a heavy satchel slung over his shoulder. Valera zoomed in. It was him. Jace Hale. He was working on something attached to the turbine housing. His movements were quick, precise. He looked tired, His shoulders slumped, but his hands were steady. Valera did not hesitate. She calculated the drop, the wind speed, the slickness of the metal. She dove. She fell 30 meters, silent as a falling leaf, and landed in a crouch 10 meters behind him. The splash of her impact was lost in the roar of the rain, but Jace stiffened. He spun around, a kinetic pistol already in his hand. Valera rose to her full height. The neon light from a nearby sign reflected off her black armor, turning her into a silhouette of violence. "Jace Hale," she said. Her voice was amplified by her helmet, booming over the rain. "Your run is over." Jace did not fire. He looked at her, his eyes narrowing against the glare. He did not look terrified. He looked annoyed. "You guys are persistent," he shouted back. "I will give you that. Dominion intelligence, or just a very expensive bounty hunter?" "It does not matter," Valera said. "Drop the weapon. Hand over the relic." Jace glanced at the satchel, then back at her. He took a step backward, toward the edge of the platform. Below him was a drop into the churning black water of the canal. "I cannot do that," he said. "You would not believe me if I told you why." "Try me," Valera said, stepping forward. Her vibro blade slid from her gauntlets with a metallic ring. Jace sighed. He looked almost apologetic. "Okay," he said. "Don't say I didn't warn you." He raised his free hand. He was holding a small, spherical device. It looked like one of the old fusion cells the mechanic had mentioned, but it had been modified with a tangle of copper wire and a pulsing blue crystal. Valera lunged. She covered the distance in a blur, her blade aiming to slice the pistol from his hand. Jace threw the device at her feet. There was no explosion, no fire. Instead, there was a high-pitched whine that escalated beyond the range of human hearing in a fraction of a second. A sphere of distorted air erupted from the device. Valera's armor screamed. The electromagnetic pulse hit her like a physical hammer. Her heads-up display flickered and died. The servo-assist motors in her legs and arms locked up instantly. The biocomposite suit, usually light as silk, suddenly became dead weight. It was like being encased in stone. Valera stumbled, her momentum carrying her forward, but her limbs refused to respond. She crashed to her knees, the impact jarring her teeth. System failure. Her suit's emergency voice stuttered. Rebooting. Estimated time, 20 seconds. 20 seconds was an eternity. Valera struggled to lift her head. The weight of the armor was crushing. She gritted her teeth, forcing her own muscles to fight against the dead machinery. Jace stood over her. He looked down, his expression unreadable. He could have shot her. He could have pushed her off the edge. Instead, he holstered his pistol. "Nice armor," he said, "but you rely too much on the assist." He turned and vaulted over the railing, dropping into the darkness below. Valera roared. It was a sound of pure, primal frustration. She strained against the suit, her veins bulging in her neck. 10 seconds. She forced one leg to move, dragging the dead servo with it. 5 seconds. She pushed herself up to a standing position, trembling with the effort. Reboot complete. Power flooded back into her limbs. The weight vanished. Valera sprinted to the railing and looked down. The canal was empty. Ripples spread across the black water, but Jace Hale was gone. She slammed her fist into the metal railing, denting it. She had him. She had him right there, and he had defeated a piece of military-grade technology worth millions of credits with a modified battery and some copper wire. It was humiliating. And it was the most exciting thing that had happened to her in a decade. Valera activated her comms unit. She opened a private log, a channel she kept only for herself to document her victories. She stared into the dark water, rain dripping from her helmet. A smile, sharp and dangerous, curled the corner of her mouth. She spoke into the recorder, her voice low and intimate. My legs were made for battle and for hunting you. Human. She closed the channel. The hunt had just changed. It was no longer just a mission. It was personal. She turned back to the turbine housing where Jace had been working. He had been doing something there before she interrupted him. Valera knelt and inspected the machinery. Tucked behind a rusty panel was a small data chip. It was blinking with a weak, encrypted signal. He left it, she realized. Or he planted it. She pulled the chip free and slotted it into her gauntlet's reader. The decryption software ran through the code in seconds. It was a video file. Valera projected it onto her visor. It was the assassination footage again. The same clip she had seen in the briefing room. The senator speaking, the shot, the chaos. But this version was different. It was the raw file, not the processed news feed. She watched the timestamp in the corner. She watched the shadows of the people in the crowd. She paused the video at the moment of the shot. She zoomed in on the window where the assassin had supposedly fired. In the official version, there was a muzzle flash. In this version, the window was empty. Valera frowned. She rewound and played it again. She looked at the senator. The blood splatter. The angle was wrong. If the shot had come from the window, the senator should have fallen forward. In the video, he jerked backward. Valera stood up slowly. The rain hammered against her armor, but she barely felt it. The footage was doctored. The official evidence was a lie. She looked out over the sprawling, neon-lit city of Carth 9. Somewhere out there, Jace Hale was running. He knew the truth. That was why he was a target. Valera Kor did not like being lied to. And she certainly did not like being used as a tool to clean up a mess she did not understand. She checked the charge on her vibro blades. She would find Jace Hale. She would break his clever toys and she would bring him down. But before she executed him, she was going to ask him a question. Valera leaped from the gantry, diving back into the shadows of the city. The game was on. The rain on Carth 9 never truly stopped. It only changed consistency, shifting from a mist to a torrent and back again. Valera Kor stood on the roof of a gargantuan habitation tower, the wind whipping her cloak around her armored legs. She was done with subtlety. The human had played his trick with the electromagnetic pulse, and he had bought himself a few hours of freedom. He would not get more. She raised her left gauntlet. The metal plates shifted and slid back, revealing a dark honeycomb of small ports. "Fly," she commanded softly. A swarm of micro-drones erupted from her wrist. They were no larger than beetles, buzzing with a sound like tearing paper. There were 200 of them. They spiraled up into the gray sky and then scattered, dispersing into the neon-lit canyons of the city. Valera closed her eyes. Her tactical visor synced with the swarm. Her vision fractured into 200 separate feeds. She saw the city through a kaleidoscope of angles. She saw heat signatures in alleyways. She heard snippets of conversations in a dozen languages. She saw the rhythmic pulse of power conduits and the flow of traffic. She was casting a net over the entire district. It took 40 minutes. The drones filtered through the noise, discarding false positives, ignoring the millions of innocent heartbeats, hunting for the specific biorhythm of Jace Hale. Then, a ping. Sector 4. The Civic Archive. Valera opened her eyes. The archive was a dead zone. It was a massive, brutalist structure of concrete and stained glass, abandoned 50 years ago when the government collapsed during the trade wars. It was unstable. Dangerous. It was exactly where she would go if she wanted to be found. He is inviting me, she realized. A grin tugged at the corner of her mouth. He wanted another round. She did not run this time. She engaged the thrusters on her back, blue fire flaring against the rain. She launched herself from the roof, soaring over the gap between the megastructures, a dark angel descending on wings of fire. The civic archive smelled of dry rot and ozone. The vast main hall was a cavern of shadows, lined with rows of towering data stacks that rose into the gloom like silent monoliths. Dust motes danced in the beams of light that filtered through the shattered ceiling. Valira moved through the hall, her steps silent despite the weight of her armor. Her drones hovered near the ceiling, providing her with a complete topographic map of the room. She saw him. Jace Hale was standing on a central platform, surrounded by terminals that had been dark for decades. He had spliced a power line into the main console, and the screens were flickering with cascading green code. He did not look up when she entered. "You took your time," he said. His voice echoed in the vast space. "I thought maybe the rain rusted your joints." Valira stopped 10 meters from him. She did not draw her weapons yet. "You left a trail a child could follow. Jace Hale," she said. "You wanted me here." "Why?" Jace turned around. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes and his coat was stained with grease and city grime. But his eyes were bright, burning with a frantic intelligence. "Because I need you to listen," he said. "And you do not seem like the type to listen when you have a gun in your hand." "I am not here to listen," Valira said, taking a step forward. "I am here to complete a contract." She triggered her exo assist, preparing to lunge. Jace slammed his hand onto a large red button on the console. "Do not move," he shouted. A deep, grinding roar shook the building. The floor beneath Valira trembled. Heavy blast shields slammed down over the exits, sealing the main hall with a sound like a thunderclap. The vibration knocked dust from the high rafters. Valira stabilized herself, her sensors flaring. "What did you do?" she demanded. "Containment protocol," Jace said, leaning back against the console. "This place used to be a secure data vault. I triggered the lockdown. Those doors are Durasteel. Nothing gets in. Nothing gets out. Not for 6 hours." Valira looked at the sealed doors, then back at him. She was not trapped with him. He was trapped with her. "You have made a grave tactical error," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "You think confinement protects you, it just means you have nowhere to run." "I am not trying to run," Jace said. He held up his hands, showing they were empty. "I am trying to buy time to explain why your bosses are lying to you." Valira crossed the distance in a blur. She grabbed him by the lapels of his coat and slammed him against the console. The metal groaned under the impact. She brought her face close to his, her golden eyes boring into him. "You assassinated Senator Kalen," she hissed. "I saw the footage. I saw the body. Do not insult my intelligence with lies." "I did not kill him," Jace said. He did not flinch, though she could feel his heart hammering against her knuckles. "I was there to meet him. He had evidence. He was going to expose the war profiteers in the Dominion Council. That is why they killed him. And that is why they framed me." Valira tightened her grip. The story was absurd. A human spy meeting a Dominion senator? It went against every protocol of the treaty. "And the relic?" she asked. "The data core you stole, it is not a relic," Jace said. "It is a truth core. It records reality without filters. It has the original footage of the assassination, not the doctored trash they showed you." Valira paused. She remembered the anomaly she had seen in the video file, the lack of recoil, the wrong angle of the fall. "Show it to me," she commanded. "I cannot," Jace said. "It is encrypted. I need a decryption key that is only found in the high-security terminals of a Dominion flagship. Or, ironically, inside this archive. That is why I am here. Valera stared at him. He was desperate. He was cornered. But he did not smell of deception. He smelled of fear and determination. She released him, stepping back but keeping her hand near her blade. "You have 5 minutes," she said. "Convince me." Jace rubbed his chest where she had grabbed him. He let out a breathless laugh. "You are strong," he said. "I will give you that. And terrifying. Do they grow all of you in vats? Or are you a special edition?" "I was forged in the stellar nurseries of Cora Prime," Valera said stiffly. "And yes, I am unique." "Great," Jace muttered. "I get the unique one. Look, check the timeline. The assassination happened at 1200 hours standard time." "I know the time," Valera said. "Where was I at 1100 hours?" Jace asked. Valera accessed her internal files. The dossier said Jace Hale was unaccounted for. "Unknown." She said, "Wrong." Jace said, "I was detained at the sector checkpoint on the other side of the city. I was arguing with a guard about a parking violation. There is a record of it." Valera frowned. That data was not in the briefing. "If you were detained, how did you get to the plaza in 1 hour?" she asked. "I did not," Jace said. "That is the point. The assassin was already in place. I arrived 5 minutes after the shot was fired. I saw the shooter. It was a Thoraxi, one of your own." Valera felt a spike of anger. Impossible. No Thoraxi would kill Kalen. He was a hero. "You are lying," she said. "I am not," Jace said. He leaned forward, his expression intense. "Why did they send you alone? Think about it. If I am such a threat, why not send a squad? Why not send a fleet? Because they want it quiet. They want you to kill me, take the drive, and bury the truth. You are the cleaner, Valera, not the soldier." The word stung. Cleaner. It implied a lack of honor, a lack of combat. Suddenly, a red light began to flash on the ceiling. A siren wailed, a low, mournful sound that vibrated in the floor. "What is that?" Valera asked, her combat instincts snapping back into focus. Jace looked up, his face paling. "Ah," he said. "That might be the automated security system. When I triggered the lockdown, I might have also woken up the Guardians." "Guardians?" Valera asked. Metallic screeching echoed from the shadows of the upper balconies. Red eyes ignited in the darkness, dozens of them. "Old security bots," Jace said, backing away from the console. "War era. They are programmed to sanitize the area of all biological life." Valera drew her blades. They ignited with a violet hum. "You are a chaotic element, Jace Hale," she said. "You trap us in a box and then fill the box with monsters." "I am good at multitasking," Jace said, drawing his kinetic pistol. The bots dropped from the ceiling. They were spider-like machines, rusted but functional, with razor-sharp limbs and rotating saws. They scuttled across the floor with terrifying speed. Valera met the first wave with a spinning slash. She severed the legs of the lead bot, then kicked its chassis into the one behind it. "Stay behind me," she ordered. "Do not get dead. I still have to interrogate you." Jace did not stay behind her. He rolled under a leaping bot and fired 3 shots into its optical sensors. The bot sparked and spun in circles, crashing into a pillar. "I can handle myself," he shouted over the noise of grinding metal. They fought back to back. The dynamic was seamless, almost instinctive. Valera was the storm, a whirlwind of violet light and shattered metal. Jace was the precision, picking off targets that tried to flank them, using the environment to trip and trap the machines. At one point, Valera was grappled by 2 heavy bots. Their pincers locked onto her arms, straining her servos. A third bot reared up, its saw spinning toward her exposed neck. Jace slid across the floor, firing into the third bot's power core. It exploded in a shower of sparks. He then jammed a metal pipe into the gears of the bot, holding her left arm, freezing it. Valira shattered the remaining bot with a headbutt and ripped her arm free. "Nice shot," she grunted. "Thanks," Jace said, reloading. Then, a scream cut through the battle. It was not a combatant. It was a thin, frail sound. Valera looked toward the back of the hall. Huddled behind a stack of data tapes were three figures: civilians, elderly archivists who had been living in the ruins, tending to the old machines. A massive security bot, twice the size of the others, was advancing on them. Its flamethrower arm was priming, a pilot light flickering. Valira calculated the distance. She was too far. She could not reach them in time. But Jace was moving before she even finished the thought. He did not fire. He sprinted directly at the massive machine. He shouted to draw its attention. "Hey!" he yelled. "Over here, you rusty bucket of bolts!" The bot turned its turret toward him. Jace slid on his knees, passing directly under the flamethrower's arc. He slapped a magnetic charge onto the bot's underbelly. He rolled away just as the charge detonated. The explosion did not destroy the bot, but it shattered the leg hydraulics. The machine toppled sideways, crashing to the floor inches from the terrified archivists. Jace scrambled to his feet and stood in front of the civilians, his pistol raised, shielding them with his own body as two more spiders approached. Valera watched him. He was a target, a terrorist, a killer of senators. But he was standing between monsters and the innocent. He was risking his life for people who meant nothing to his mission. The cognitive dissonance hit her harder than any blow. The propaganda said humans were selfish. It said they were chaotic and cruel. This human was noble. Valera let out a sharp exhale. She engaged her thrusters, shooting across the hall like a missile. She landed in front of Jace and the archivists. With a single, fluid motion, she decapitated the two approaching spiders. The hall fell silent. The remaining bots retreated into the shadows, their programming recognizing a superior threat. Valera stood amidst the wreckage, her chest heaving slightly. She deactivated her blades. Jace lowered his gun. He looked at the archivists. "Are you hurt?" he asked them gently. The old woman shook her head, staring at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Go," Jace said. "Hide in the lower levels and it is safer there." They scrambled away, vanishing into the gloom. Jace turned to Valera. He wiped sweat and grease from his forehead. "Well," he said, "that was intense." Valera stared at him. She looked at his hands, which were shaking slightly. She looked at the burn mark on his coat where a laser had grazed him. "You are a fool," she said. "You could have been killed." Jace shrugged. "They were civilians. We do not leave them behind. It is a rule." "Whose rule?" Valera asked. "Mine," Jace said. Valera stepped closer. The adrenaline of the fight was fading, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. The lockdown was lifting. The blast doors were groaning as the timer expired. She had to make a choice. She looked at the exit. Then she looked at Jace. He was reloading his pistol, distracted. Valera moved. She did not use a weapon. She stepped inside his guard, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. Jace gasped as his pistol clattered to the floor. Before he could react, she spun him around and swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard. Valera was on him instantly, her knee pressing into the center of his back, pinning him to the cold stone. She grabbed his arm and pulled it up behind him, applying pressure to a nerve cluster in his shoulder. It was a subdual hold, painful, but not damaging. It paralyzed the motor functions of the upper body. "Ow," Jace groaned, his face pressed against the floor. "That is really unnecessary." You are under arrest. Jace Hale, Valira said. Her voice was calm, authoritative, by the authority of the Thoraxi Dominion. Jace laughed, a wheezing sound. I thought we were having a moment, you know, bonding over robot destruction. The moment is over, Valira said. Do not struggle. It will only hurt more. She pulled a set of suppression cuffs from her belt and locked them around his wrists. She hauled him to his feet. He swayed slightly, dizzy from the takedown. Valira steadied him, her hand lingering on his arm for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Walk, she said. The holding facility was a repurposed storage unit near the spaceport. It was small, stark, and smelled of antiseptic. Valira had cleared the room of everything except a metal table and 2 chairs. Jace sat on one side, his hands cuffed to the table. Valira stood on the other, her helmet removed. She had been interrogating him for 2 hours. So let me get this straight, Jace said, leaning back as far as the cuffs would allow. You grew up in a military academy on a planet with 3 suns. You have never eaten a real apple. And your idea of a vacation is a simulation of a harder war. That is tragic, Valira, truly tragic. It is efficient, Valira said, pacing the small room. We are bred for purpose. My purpose is to protect the Dominion, and to look scary while doing it, Jace added. You definitely nailed that part. Valira stopped pacing. She placed her hands on the table and leaned in. Stop deflecting, she said. Tell me about the contact who gave you the intel on the senator. Who is the leak? I told you, Jace said. I do not know his name. He used a voice scrambler. He just said the war was a lie, that people were getting rich off the blood of your kind and mine. Valira stared at him. She wanted to break him. She wanted to force the truth out. But every time she looked at him, she saw him diving under the flamethrower. She saw the lack of malice in his eyes. Why do you joke? She asked suddenly. You are facing execution, yet you make light of everything. Jace's smile faded. He looked down at his hands. Because if I do not laugh, I will scream, he said softly. Because the galaxy is a dark, absurd place. Valira. And if you let it take your humor, it takes your soul next. Valira felt a strange sensation in her chest. It was a tightness, a resonance. She had never met anyone like him. He was weak compared to her, fragile. Yet he possessed a resilience she could not quantify. She found herself wanting to know what he was thinking, not the tactical data, but the man. She pulled up the assassination file on the table's holographic interface. I reviewed the footage again, she said quietly. Jace looked up. And there is a glitch, Valira admitted. Frame 4002. The senator's shadow does not align with the light source. It is a composite image, a deepfake overlay. Jace let out a long breath. He slumped in his chair. Thank you, he said. Finally. Someone with eyes. It proves the video is altered, Valira said. It does not prove you are innocent. It only proves someone wanted to ensure a conviction. It is a start, Jace said. He looked at her, and for the first time, there was no sarcasm in his voice. You could have ignored it. You could have just followed orders. Why didn't you? Valira looked away. She looked at the gray wall of the cell. Because I am a hunter, she said. Not a butcher. A hunter respects the truth of the prey. She looked back at him. The air in the room felt suddenly thick, charged with a static electricity that had nothing to do with her armor. They were enemies. They were different species from worlds light years apart. But in that moment, she felt a pull, a gravity. She wanted to touch him, not to hurt him, to understand the fragile biology that held so much defiance. She stepped back, breaking the tension. "My orders are to execute you upon confirmation of identity," she said formally. Jace swallowed. He looked at her, waiting. Valira tapped a command into the console. The holographic file vanished. However, she continued, her voice steady. "The irregularities in the evidence require higher-level analysis. Field execution would result in the loss of critical intelligence." She unlocked the magnetic seal on the door. "I am taking you off-world," she said. "To the Dominion flagship. If you are lying, you will die there. If you are telling the truth, then we are both in a lot of trouble," Jace finished. Valira looked at him. A small, barely perceptible smile touched her lips. "Get up, human," she said. She walked to him and unlocked his cuffs from the table, but kept his wrists bound together. As she did, her fingers brushed against his skin. It was warm. Jace looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "Thank you," he whispered. "Do not make me regret it," Valira said. She grabbed him by the arm and marched him toward the door. The hunt was over, but the war was just beginning. And for the first time in her life, Valira Kor was not sure which side she was on. The prisoner transport shuttle, a standard-issue Dominion heavy lifter, hummed with a low, vibrating frequency that rattled the teeth. Valira sat in the pilot's seat, her hands moving over the haptic controls with practiced, rigid efficiency. The autopilot was engaged, but she never trusted machines completely. Her eyes scanned the telemetry readouts, watching the curvature of Karth 9 fade below them as they climbed toward the upper atmosphere. Jace Hale sat in the co-pilot's seat, his wrists still bound in the magnetic suppression cuffs. He was looking out the viewport at the sprawling, storm-covered planet they were leaving behind. "You are flying manual," he observed. Valira did not look at him. "I prefer control," she said. "Control is an illusion," Jace said, leaning his head back against the headrest. "You think you are flying this ship, but you are just following a flight path someone else programmed. You are just a passenger with a better view." Valira tightened her grip on the yoke. "Silence. Prisoner," she commanded. Jace chuckled softly. "We are alone." "Valira," he said. "You can stop calling me prisoner. My name is Jace, and you are taking me to your flagship to prove I am innocent. That makes us partners, technically." "We are not partners," Valira said, her voice sharp. "You are a variable I am transporting for analysis. Do not mistake my curiosity for camaraderie." She checked the proximity sensors. The upper atmosphere was usually clear, but the sensors were picking up static interference, a cluster of debris, a magnetic storm. Then the proximity alarm screamed. 3 contacts. The ship's computer announced, "High velocity. Intercept vector." Valira's combat reflexes took over instantly. She disengaged the autopilot and threw the shuttle into a hard banking turn. The gravitational compensators whined, struggling to keep up with the G-force. "Who are they?" Jace shouted, straining against his restraints. "Friends of yours?" Valira scanned the incoming signatures. They were sleek, black, and shaped like arrowheads. They moved in perfect synchronization, a tight formation that no pirate or human extremist cell could replicate. They did not broadcast identification codes. They did not hail the shuttle. They locked weapons. Dominion stealth fighters, Valira whispered, her blood running cold. "Wraith class. Dominion?" Jace asked. "Why would your own people attack us?" "Because we are loose ends," Valira said. A beam of concentrated particle energy slammed into the shuttle's starboard engine. The impact threw the vessel sideways. Alarms blared, bathing the cockpit in a pulsating red light. Shields at 40%. The computer warned, starboard engine offline. Valera fought the controls. The stick bucked in her hands like a living thing. She pushed the thrusters to maximum, diving back toward the planet. "Hang on," she yelled. She initiated a corkscrew maneuver, spinning the bulky transport to avoid the next volley of fire. The attackers were relentless. They anticipated her moves. They knew the capabilities of her ship better than she did. "They are using Pattern Delta," Valera realized with horror. It was a kill box tactic taught only to the elite hunter-killer units of the Dominion. These were not rogue elements. These were her peers. Jace was thrown against the side of the cockpit as the ship shuddered under another hit. "Uncuff me," he shouted. Valera hesitated for a fraction of a second. Protocol demanded the prisoner remain secured, but Protocol had just fired a plasma torpedo at her. She reached over and slammed her palm onto the release command. The magnetic cuffs snapped open. Jace rubbed his wrists and immediately began tapping into the co-pilot's console. "I am rerouting power from life support to the rear shields," he said, his fingers flying over the interface. "It will buy us 30 seconds. Make it count," Valera said. She saw an opening in the cloud layer below, a violent, swirling storm system over the equatorial salt plains. It was suicide to fly into it, but it was death to stay up here. She dove. The shuttle screamed as it hit the atmosphere. Heat flared across the viewport, turning the world into a blur of orange fire. The three black fighters pursued them, firing pulses of green energy that sizzled past the hull. "They are still on us," Jace yelled. Valera gritted her teeth. She diverted the last of the auxiliary power to the remaining engine. "Brace for impact," she commanded. She pulled the nose up at the last second, skimming the top of the storm clouds. She deployed the deceleration chutes, but the speed was too high. The fabric ripped away instantly. The shuttle clipped a ridge of crystallized salt. The sound was deafening, a screech of tearing metal that drowned out the world. The ship tumbled, rolling end over end across the vast glassy plain, shedding armor plates and cargo pods like leaves in a hurricane. Then, darkness. Valera woke to the sound of wind. It was a high, mournful howling, like 1,000 flutes playing a funeral dirge. She was hanging upside down in her pilot's harness. The cockpit was shattered. The viewport was gone, replaced by a jagged hole that let in the freezing air and the abrasive dust of the salt plains. She groaned, reaching up to unclasp her harness. Her armor had protected her from the worst of the impact, but her body felt bruised and heavy. She dropped to the ceiling, which was now the floor, with a heavy thud. "Jace?" she called out. There was no answer. She scrambled over the twisted wreckage of the console. Jace was slumped in the corner of the cockpit, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. He was unconscious. Valera checked his pulse. It was strong. She exhaled, a sound of relief she did not expect to make. She grabbed him by his coat and dragged him out of the wreckage. The landscape outside was a nightmare of beauty and lethality. The salt plains of Karth 9 stretched to the horizon, a flat, endless expanse of white crystal that reflected the twin suns with blinding intensity. The wind whipped up shards of salt that cut like glass. Valera scanned the sky. The black fighters were gone. They likely assumed no one could survive the crash, or perhaps the storm was too dangerous for them to linger. "We have to move," she said to herself. She activated her armor's environmental shielding, but a warning light blinked on her wrist display. Oxygen scrubber damaged, efficiency at 50%. She cursed. The impact had cracked the intake valve on her suit. She could breathe the planet's air for short periods, but it was thin and laced with sulfur. Without the scrubbers, she would suffocate within 6 hours. Jace groaned and opened his eyes. He blinked, shielding his face from the glare. "Did we win?" he asked hoarsely. "We survived," Valira said, "which is a victory of sorts. Can you walk?" Jace pushed himself up. He winced, clutching his side. "I think I cracked a rib," he said. "But my legs work." "Where are we?" "The glass plains," Valira said, "thousands of miles from the city. But my navigational database indicates a settlement near the canyon rim to the east, a smuggler's outpost." Jace squinted at the horizon. "East," he said. "That is straight into the wind. Do you have a better idea?" Valira asked. Jace looked at the wreckage of the ship. Then he looked at her. "Lead the way, Captain," he said. The trek was a brutal exercise in endurance. The wind was relentless, pushing against them with the force of a physical wall. The salt crunching under their boots was slippery and sharp. Valira took the lead, using her armored bulk to break the wind for Jace. But as the hours passed, her suit's damage began to take its toll. Her breathing grew labored. The air inside her helmet tasted stale and metallic. She stumbled. "Valira," Jace said, grabbing her arm to steady her. "You are drifting." "I am fine," she wheezed. "My systems are recalibrating." "You are suffocating," Jace said bluntly. He looked at the cracked valve on her chest plate. "Take the helmet off. The air is toxic," Valira said. "It is thin and it smells like rotten eggs." Jace said, "But it has oxygen. Your suit is recycling your own carbon dioxide. Take it off." Valira hesitated. A Dominion warrior did not remove their armor in a hostile environment. It was the first rule of survival. Jace reached up and unlatched the seal at her neck. "Trust me," he said. He pulled the helmet off. Valira gasped. The wind hit her face like a slap. The air was freezing and tasted of sulfur. But it was fresh. She coughed, her lungs burning, but the dizziness began to fade. She looked at Jace. He was wrapping a scarf around his face to filter the dust. His eyes were concerned. "Better?" he asked. "Functional," she said, wiping grit from her eyes. They continued walking. The suns began to set, painting the salt plains in hues of violent purple and blood orange. The temperature dropped rapidly. They found shelter in the lee of a massive, crystallized rock formation that jutted out of the plain like a broken tooth. They huddled together against the stone, sharing the limited warmth of a survival blanket Valira had salvaged from the crash. Valira looked at Jace. He was shivering, despite his heavy coat. "Why did you join the military?" she asked suddenly. The silence was louder than the wind. Jace looked at her, surprised by the question. "I wanted to see the stars," he said. "I grew up on a station in the asteroid belt. The sky was always just black rock. The coalition recruiters promised me I would see new worlds. They promised I would be protecting people." "And?" Valira asked. "And I did," Jace said. "For a while, I was a scout. I found habitable worlds. I helped colonies get established. But then the politics started. We would find a world, and the corporations would move in. They would strip mine it, displace the locals, and call it progress. I was not protecting people. I was a bird dog for greedy men in suits." He looked at Valira. "What about you?" he asked. "You said you were bred for this. Do you even have a choice?" Valira looked at her hands. The silver skin was marked with faint white scars, reminders of training accidents and duels. "We are taken at age 5, she said quietly. "Tested. The weak are sent to the labor castes. The strong are sent to the academies. I was the strongest in my generation. I was told that my strength was a gift to the Dominion, that without us chaos would consume the galaxy." "And you believed them," Jace said. It was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact. I had no reason not to, Valera said. Until today. Until I saw Dominion ships fire on a Dominion transport. She looked up at the stars appearing in the darkening sky. I am terrified. Jace, she admitted. Her voice was small, stripped of its usual command. If the Dominion is corrupt, then what am I? I have spent my life being a sword. If the hand that wields me is evil, then the sword is evil too. Jace shifted. He reached out and placed his hand over hers. His palm was rough, warm, and shockingly human. You are not a sword, Valera, he said firmly. You are a person. A sword does not hesitate when it sees civilians in danger. A sword does not ask questions. You did. He squeezed her hand. Courage is not about following orders, he said. It is not about never being afraid. It is about being terrified and choosing to do the right thing anyway. It is about looking at the command and saying no because it protects the innocent. You have that courage. I saw it in the archive. Valera looked at him. In the dim light of the moons, his face was open, honest. There was no mockery there, no enemy. She did not pull her hand away. We should sleep, she said softly. We have a long walk tomorrow. The smuggler's outpost was less of a building and more of a heap of scrap metal that had been welded together and shoved into a fissure in the canyon wall. It looked like it was held together by rust and optimism. A sign above the heavy blast door read, Zola's Salvage and Refreshments. Do not ask about the meat. Jace banged on the door. Open up. Zola, he shouted. It is Jace. I brought a friend. A viewing slot slid open. A pair of yellow eyes, set deep in a wrinkled, leathery face, peered out. Jace? The voice rasped. It sounded like gravel in a blender. You look terrible. Did you get run over by a bantha? Something like that, Jace said. Let us in. Zola, we are freezing out here. The bolts clanked back, and the heavy door swung open. Zola was a thoraxi, like Valera, but she was twice the width and half the height. She wore a grease-stained mechanic's jumpsuit and a necklace made of spark plugs. She looked at Valera, her eyes widening. By the ancestors, she exclaimed. You brought a Dominion Justicar to my door? Are you trying to get me executed, human? She is with me, Jace said quickly, stepping between them. She is off the clock. Zola eyed Valera suspiciously, then shrugged. Fine. But if she tries to arrest anyone, I am feeding her to the recyclers. Come in. The inside of the outpost was chaotic and warm. It smelled of engine oil and spicy stew. Piles of scavenged tech cluttered every corner. A few motley aliens sat at a makeshift bar, drinking from tin cups. Zola led them to a back room, pushing aside a curtain of hanging chains. Sit, she commanded. I will get you food and bandages. You both look like you fell out of the sky. Literally, Jace muttered. Valera sat on a crate, her eyes scanning the room. It was a storeroom, filled with boxes and wrapped pallets. She felt out of place here, in this messy, unofficial world. While Jace talked to Zola, Valera stood up and walked toward a stack of crates in the corner. They were different from the others. New. Clean. They bore no shipping manifests, only a serial number stamped in red ink. She recognized the font. She ran her hand over the lid of the top crate. It was locked with a biometric seal. Valera pressed her thumb against the scanner. It beeped green. Access granted. Justicar. The crate chimed. Valera's heart hammered in her chest. She lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in protective foam, were 6 long-range pulse rifles. They were sleek, silver, and unmistakably Dominion military issue. Specifically, they were V7 sniper variants, the exact weapon type that ballistics said had killed Senator Kalin. Valera felt the room spin. "Jace," she said. Her voice was a strangled whisper. Jace walked over, holding 2 bowls of stew. He stopped when he saw the weapons. "Oh," he said softly. "These are restricted," Valera said, picking up one of the rifles. "These are not sold. They are issued only to special operations units." "What are they doing in a smuggler's den?" Zola walked in with a med kit. She froze when she saw the open crate. "Hey," she barked. "Stay out of the merchandise." "Where did you get these?" Valera demanded, turning on her. She leveled the rifle at Zola. The movement was fluid, instinctive. Zola threw her hands up. "I do not know. A shipment came in last week from a private contractor. They paid triple to store it here until pickup. I did not ask questions. That is the rule." "Who was the contractor?" Valera shouted. "A human," Zola yelled back. "Some fancy guy, dressed like a diplomat. Said he represented the coalition." Valera lowered the rifle. "A human diplomat, storing Dominion weapons." It was the final piece of the puzzle. The conspiracy was not just internal to the Dominion, it was cross-border. A faction of Dominion warmongers working with human extremists. They used Dominion weapons to kill a Dominion senator, blaming it on a human to start a war that both sides would profit from. "It is a circle," Valera whispered. "A perfect closed circle of lies." She sank back onto the crate, the rifle hanging from her hand. "They killed him to stop the peace," she said. "And they sent me to kill you to bury the evidence." Jace took the rifle from her hand gently and set it back in the box. He turned to Zola. "Give us a minute." "Zola, please." Zola looked at them, sensing the gravity of the moment. She nodded and backed out of the room, closing the curtain. Valera sat with her head in her hands. The certainty that had defined her entire existence was shattered. She felt unmoored, drifting. "I am a traitor," she said. "If I continue this, I am a traitor to my command, to my people." Jace knelt in front of her. He reached out and took her hands, pulling them away from her face. "Look at me," he said. Valera looked at him. Her golden eyes were shimmering with unshed tears. "You are loyal to the truth," Jace said, his voice intense and quiet. "That does not make you a traitor. That makes you a savior. The Dominion is not the Council. The Dominion is the people, the families on the colony worlds, the civilians like Zola. If you let this war happen, they are the ones who burn." Valera looked at his mouth, then his eyes. The distance between them seemed to vanish. The room was silent save for the hum of the ventilation fans. She leaned forward. It was a slow, deliberate movement, a question. Jace did not pull away. He leaned in to meet her. When their lips touched, it was not an explosion. It was an anchoring. It was a desperate, fierce collision of two people finding the only solid thing in a collapsing universe. Valera kissed him with the intensity of a warrior, hungry and demanding, but underneath it was a terrifying vulnerability. Jace's hands moved to her face, holding her gently, as if she were made of glass and not biocomposite armor. She pulled back, breathless, her forehead resting against his. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "I do not know how to be." "This. You are doing fine," Jace whispered back. "Just follow my lead." "No," Valera said, a ghost of a smile returning to her lips. "I lead. You follow." She kissed him again, deeper this time, sealing a pact that was stronger than any treaty. It was a promise of mutual destruction or mutual salvation. They broke apart as footsteps approached the curtain. Valera stood up, Composing herself, she was still a Justicar, but she was no longer a pawn. "We need the relic," she said, her voice steady again. "The truth core." Jace stood beside her. "It is in the floating canyon labs," he said. "About 200 clicks north. Then we go north," Valira said. She looked at the crate of weapons one last time. "We are going to get that evidence," she said. "And then we are going to burn this conspiracy to the ground. With you all the way." "Partner," Jace said. Valira looked at him. "Partner." She agreed. She picked up her helmet. The hunt was over. The war had begun. And this time, she knew exactly who the enemy was. The journey to the floating canyon labs was a pilgrimage through a graveyard of physics. Valira guided the scavenged grav skiff through a winding chasm where the laws of nature seemed to have been rewritten by a bored deity. To their left, a waterfall flowed upward, dissolving into mist before it hit the clouds. To their right, massive chunks of obsidian rock floated in suspended animation, tethered to the ground by crackling arcs of static electricity. Jace sat in the passenger seat, gripping the roll bar with white-knuckled intensity. He watched a boulder the size of a house drift lazily across their path. "I hate this," he muttered. "I really hate this. Gravity should be a constant. It is the one rule we are all supposed to agree on." Valira banked the skiff hard to avoid a pocket of distorted space that rippled like oil on water. "The ancients who built this place did not care about your rules," she said, her voice calm despite the turbulence. "They treated reality like clay." She felt a strange hum in the base of her skull. It had started 10 miles back, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to synchronize with her twin heartbeats. It was not painful, but it was insistent. It felt like a summons. Ahead of them, the canyon widened into a vast bowl-shaped depression. Suspended in the center, held aloft by 3 humming gravitational pylons, was the facility. It was a sprawling complex of white metal and glass, overgrown with alien moss that glowed with a faint bioluminescence. Beneath the clean lines of the Dominion architecture, however, was something older. Dark, geometric ruins jutted out from the rock, angular and menacing, pulsing with a slow, rhythmic purple light. Valira brought the skiff in for a landing on a rusted docking platform that extended from the main lab. As the engines whined down, the silence of the canyon washed over them. It was a heavy, expectant silence. "Stay close," Valira commanded, checking the charge on her pulse rifle. This facility was abandoned during the expansion wars, but the automated systems might still be active. Jace jumped out, testing the ground with his boot. "It feels lighter here," he said, bouncing slightly. "Low gravity." Valira stepped onto the platform. The hum in her head intensified. She looked at the dark ruins beneath the lab. They seemed to be watching her. "We are not alone," she whispered. They moved toward the airlock. The door was sealed, covered in decades of grime. Valira reached for the manual override lever, but before her hand could touch the cold metal, the control panel lit up. Genetic signature detected. A synthetic voice announced. It was not the standard Dominion computer voice. It was deeper, resonant, speaking a dialect of high thoraxy that had not been spoken in centuries. "Welcome, Scion." The heavy doors hissed open. Jace looked at Valira, his eyebrows raised. "Scion?" he asked. "Since when does the Dominion call its soldiers Scion?" "I do not know," Valira said, stepping into the corridor. She felt a chill crawl up her spine. "My genetic template is classified. It was designed for combat optimization." "Maybe they optimized you with something they found down here," Jace suggested, his voice echoing in the dark hallway. The interior of the lab was a tomb of technology. Overturned desks, shattered data terminals, and the skeletal remains of research droids littered the floor. But as they ventured deeper, the Dominion tech gave way to the precursor architecture. The walls became smooth, black stone that absorbed the light from their flashlights. They entered a central chamber, a vast spherical room dominated by a rotating ring of energy in the center. Inside the ring, suspended in a stasis field, was a small object. It looked like a dodecahedron made of liquid mercury. The truth core, Jace breathed. He moved toward it, pulling a scanning device from his coat pocket. Careful, Valera warned. As Jace stepped onto the central walkway, the shadows detached themselves from the walls. They were not biological. They were machines, but not like any Valera had ever fought. They were tall, skeletal constructs made of the same dark stone as the ruins, with limbs that floated disconnected from their bodies, held together by magnetic fields. Their single eyes burned with violet fire. Guardians, Valera said, raising her rifle. The machines let out a shrieking mechanical war cry and charged. Valera moved. In the low gravity, she was a blur. She leaped over the first attacker, twisting in the air to fire a burst of plasma into its power core. The shot absorbed into the stone, doing nothing. Energy weapons are useless, she shouted, landing in a crouch. Jace scrambled back as a guardian swung a massive stone fist at him. The floor cracked where he had been standing a second before. Use kinetics, Jace yelled, drawing his pistol. He fired 3 solid slugs at the guardian's eye. The glass shattered, and the machine collapsed into a pile of loose rocks. Valera holstered her rifle and drew her vibroblades. She did not ignite the energy field. She used them as solid steel. She engaged the remaining 3 guardians. It was a brutal, physical dance. She ducked under a swinging stone arm, driving her blade into the gap between the floating torso and the hip. She wrenched the metal joint free, severing the magnetic field. The guardian fell apart. The last one lunged at her. Valera caught its wrist, the impact jarring her shoulder. She looked into its violet eye. For a second, the machine paused. The hum in her head spiked to a crescendo. The guardian's eye flickered. Cyan. It rasped. Then it shut down, dropping to the floor in a heap of inert stone. Valera stood panting, the silence returning to the chamber. She looked at her hands. They were trembling. It spoke to me, she said. Jace walked over, kicking a piece of the destroyed guardian away. It called you Scion again, he said. Valera, whatever they did to create you, it wasn't just Theraxi science. They spliced you with this, with the ancients. Valera looked at the ruins around them. She had always been told she was the pinnacle of Dominion engineering, a weapon forged for the glory of the Empire. But if she was part of this dead alien civilization, then she was not just a weapon, she was a key. We can figure out your family tree later, Jace said gently. Right now, we need that core. He approached the stasis field. He typed a rapid sequence into his scanner and held it up to the energy ring. The field hummed, then dissipated. The mercury-like object dropped into his hand. Got it, he said. Suddenly, the air in the chamber shifted. A new sound echoed from the corridor they had just entered. The sound of magnetic boots clamping onto metal. Human voices. Clear the room, a man shouted. Valera grabbed Jace and pulled him behind a slab of fallen masonry just as the entrance exploded with flashbang grenades. Blinding white light filled the chamber, followed by the roar of automatic gunfire. Bullets sparked off the black stone walls. Valera peered over the edge of their cover. A squad of 12 humans in tactical gear was fanning out into the room. They wore mismatched armor painted with a red symbol, a broken chain. The Liberty Front, Jace whispered. Extremists. They want total separation from the Dominion. They think the peace treaty is a trap. They saw us land, Valira noted. They are flanking us. One of the soldiers spotted them. There, behind the pillar. It is the traitor Hale. Focus fire, the leader screamed. Bullets chipped away at their cover. Valira instinctively calculated the trajectory for a counterattack. She could vault the pillar, take out the two on the left, use their bodies as shields, and eliminate the leader before the others could react. It would be efficient. It would be bloody. She looked at Jace. He was huddled against the stone, clutching the truth core to his chest. He looked at her, his eyes wide. He knew what she was thinking. He knew she could kill them all. Do not do it, he mouthed. Valera looked back at the soldiers. They were angry. They were misguided, but they were not the enemy. They were pawns, just like she had been. She made a choice. She deactivated her blades. She stood up, walking out from behind the cover, her hands raised empty in the air. Cease fire, she bellowed. Her voice, trained on the parade grounds of the Capitol, boomed across the chamber with the force of a thunderclap. The soldiers were so shocked by the sight of a 7-foot-tall Dominion Justicar surrendering that they actually stopped shooting. Hold! The leader shouted. He was a scarred man with a cybernetic eye. He leveled his rifle at her chest. Give me one reason not to vaporize you. Alien. Because you are fighting the wrong war, Valira said calmly. She stepped forward, ignoring the 12 rifles pointed at her heart. You think Jace Hale betrayed you? You think he killed Senator Kalen to help the Dominion? He did. The leader spat. We saw the news. He is a collaborator. He is a scapegoat, Valira countered. And so are you. She gestured to Jace. Come out. Jace stood up slowly, holding the truth core. Show them, Valira commanded. Jace tapped the surface of the device. A holographic projection sprang to life in the dim air. It was the assassination footage again. But this time, it was the raw, unalterable reality recorded by the room's ambient sensors. The soldiers watched in silence. They saw the senator speaking. They saw the window, and they saw the assassin. It was not Jace Hale. It was a figure in black stealth armor, firing a Dominion V7 pulse rifle. But as the assassin turned to flee, the holographic resolution sharpened. The faceplate of the assassin's helmet retracted for a split second. It was a thoraxi, but not just any thoraxi. It was Councilman Drogan, the leader of the Warhawk faction. The soldier leader lowered his rifle. Drogan? He muttered. But he is the one who funded our cell. He gave us the intel on Hale. Because he wanted you to kill the only witness, Valira said. He used you. He supplied you with weapons, fed you lies, and pointed you at his enemies. He wants a war, and he is using your patriotism to start it. The leader looked at Valira, then at Jace, then at the hologram. The anger drained out of his face, replaced by a hollow realization. We have been played, he whispered. We have all been played, Jace said, stepping up beside Valira. But we can stop it. This core proves everything. If we get this to the summit, the war stops before it starts. The leader looked at his squad. They lowered their weapons, looking confused and ashamed. He looked back at Valira. You could have killed us, he said. A Justicar? In close quarters? We would be dead by now. Valira looked him in the eye. My legs were made for battle, she said softly. But today, they are standing for something else. The leader nodded slowly. He signaled to his men. Clear a path, he ordered. Let them pass. They made camp in a sheltered alcove of the ruins, waiting for the canyon winds to die down before attempting the flight back. A small fire made of chemical bricks crackled in the center, casting dancing shadows on the ancient walls. Valera sat with her back against a pillar, cleaning her vibro blades. Jace was tinkering with the truth core, ensuring the data was locked. "That was risky," Jace said, breaking the silence. "Standing up like that. If they had itchy trigger fingers—" "I trusted my instincts," Valera said without looking up. "You trusted them," Jace corrected. "You trusted humans." Valera paused. She looked at the blade in her hand, seeing her own reflection in the metal. "I trusted that they were soldiers," she said, "and soldiers know the smell of truth." She sheathed the blade and looked at him. The firelight softened the sharp angles of her face. "You were right, Jace, about courage. It was harder to not fight than it would have been to fight." Jace smiled. It was a tired, warm smile that made Valera's hearts beat out of sync. "You are evolving, Valera Core. It is a good look on you." He moved closer, sitting beside her against the pillar. The heat from his body was a stark contrast to the cold stone. Valera looked at him. They were two fugitives on a rock floating in the middle of nowhere, hunted by the most powerful empire in the galaxy. By all logic, she should be terrified. She should be planning tactical contingencies. Instead, she felt a profound sense of peace. She reached out and traced the line of his jaw with her thumb. Her skin was cool. His was warm. "I do not know what happens next," she said quietly. "When we broadcast this, my life as I know it is over. I can never go back to the ranks. I will be an outcast." "You will be free," Jace said. He covered her hand with his own. "And you will not be alone." Valera looked into his eyes. She saw the reflection of the fire and something else. A promise. She leaned in, and this time, there was no hesitation, no awkwardness. She kissed him, and it was a claiming. It was a declaration that in a universe of lies and manufactured wars, this thing between them was real. Jace's hands tangled in her silver hair, pulling her closer. Valera shifted, her armor clinking softly against the stone, and straddled his lap. She was heavy, powerful, lethal, but with him, she was gentle. She let the weight of her duty fall away, leaving only the woman. They moved together with a slow, desperate intensity. It was not just passion. It was a refuge. It was a way to say, "I am here and you are here and we are alive." When they finally broke apart, breathless and tangled together, Valera rested her head on his shoulder. "I could get used to this," she murmured. "The freedom." Jace laughed softly, stroking her back. "Careful. Just a car. Freedom is addictive. Next thing you know, you will be growing your hair out and listening to jazz." Valera smiled against his neck. "Let us not get ahead of ourselves." Suddenly, a harsh static noise cut through the intimate silence. Valera's wrist comms unit, which she had thought was disabled, flared to life. A holographic projection burst into the air above the fire. It was a galaxy-wide alert channel. The seal of the High Dominion Council rotated slowly in red light. "Attention all sectors," a cold, synthetic voice announced. Valera stiffened. Jace sat up, his hand instinctively going to his pistol. Priority 1 alert. Status: fugitive. A massive image of Valera's face appeared in the hologram. It was her official service file photo, stoic, terrifying, staring blankly ahead. Subject: Valera Core. Rank: Justicar. Status: rogue. The voice continued, emotionless and condemning. Subject is accused of high treason, the murder of Senator Kalin, and the theft of classified military assets. Subject is considered armed and extremely dangerous. She has been compromised by human extremist ideology. Kill on sight order is authorized. Reward for confirmation of death. 5 million credits. The hologram shifted to show a grainy image of Jace. Accomplice. Jace Hale. Human terrorist. Kill on sight. The message looped. Kill on sight. Kill on sight. Valera reached out and crushed the comms unit in her hand. Sparks showered onto the dirt. The hologram flickered and died, leaving them back in the dim light of the fire. She sat there, the silence ringing in her ears. Rogue, traitor. The words were branded onto her now. There was no going back. There was no clearing her name in a quiet courtroom. They had painted her as a monster to the entire galaxy. She felt a coldness settling in her stomach, but then she felt Jace's hand on her shoulder. Solid. Real. 5 million credits. Jace whistled low. I think that is an insult. You are worth at least 10. Valera looked at him. She saw the fear in his eyes, but she also saw the defiance. He was trying to make her laugh. He was trying to keep her from breaking. She took a deep breath. She stood up, the movement full of a new, dangerous grace. She was not the soldier they had trained anymore. She was something else, something they had not accounted for. They want a monster, she said, her voice low and hard. She looked down at Jace and extended her hand to pull him up. Then let us go show them what a monster looks like when she fights for the truth. Jace took her hand. Ready when you are, partner. Valera looked out at the canyon, where the first light of dawn was beginning to touch the floating rocks. We have a summit to crash, she said. The galaxy had become a series of dark corners and desperate jumps. For 3 weeks, Valera Core and Jace Hale had ceased to be people. They were ghosts, slipping through the cracks of the civilized systems. They moved from the rust-colored shadow ports of the outer rim to the neon-drenched underlevels of independent trade stations. They slept in shifts. They ate synthetic protein paste that tasted like wet cardboard. They kept their weapons charged and their eyes on the exits. The bounty on Valera's head had doubled, 10 million credits. It was enough to make a saint consider murder, and the people they were hiding among were far from saints. They were currently holed up in a maintenance sublevel of Station Omega-4, a drifting hive of scum suspended in the magnetic fields of a dying star. The air recyclers hummed with a death rattle, and the walls vibrated every time a heavy freighter docked 3 levels up. Valera sat on a crate, sharpening her vibro blade. The repetitive shing-shing sound was the only thing keeping her grounded. We cannot keep doing this, she said. Her voice was low, tight. We are burning fuel and credits we do not have. Every jump leaves a thermal signature. Dominion intelligence is tightening the net. I can feel them. Jace was pacing the small metal room, checking his data pad for the 100th time. We just need to get to the summit, he said. The interstellar Concord meets in 48 hours. If we can get the truth core into the main transmission feed, it is over. The evidence goes galaxy-wide. And how do we get into the most heavily guarded station in the sector? Valera asked. She stopped sharpening the blade and looked at him. The summit is a fortress. It will be surrounded by 3 Dominion fleets and the human coalition blockade. We are 2 fugitives in a stolen shuttle that smells like wet dog. Jace stopped pacing. He grinned, though it looked strained. We are not just 2 fugitives, he said. We have a wizard. As if on cue, a ventilation grate in the ceiling clattered open. A small, 4-armed figure dropped down, landing with a surprising amount of grace for someone carrying a backpack twice his size. It was Rin, the gossip-loving mechanic from Karth 9. Rin dusted off his coveralls and adjusted his oversized goggles. I heard the word wizard, Rin chirped. I prefer the term digital artisan, but I will accept wizard if it comes with a pay raise. Valera stood up. You made it. Barely, Rin said, shuddering. Do you know how hard it is to smuggle yourself out of a blockaded sector? I had to hide in a crate of frozen tuber roots. I smell like a vegetable. A very cold vegetable. Do you have it? Valera asked, ignoring the complaint. Rin tapped the side of his backpack. The diplomatic codes. Yes. I managed to slice into the encrypted sub-channel of the Gornath delegation. They are a minor species, very bureaucratic, very boring. No one watches them. I forged credentials for 3 attachés. 3? Jace asked. Rin pointed a thumb at himself. Someone has to fly the getaway ship. Human. And besides, I want to see the look on the High Counselor's face when you drop the truth bomb. It will be great content for my memoirs. Valera felt a flicker of warmth. Rin owed them nothing. He was a civilian, a mechanic who liked gossip and credits. Yet here he was, risking execution for a cause that was not his own. Thank you. Rin, she said. Rin waved a hand dismissively. Don't get mushy, tall one. It ruins your scary reputation. Now, here's the plan. The Gornath delegation ship docks at the summit station in 12 hours. We intercept their shuttle, non-lethally, of course, swap out the transponder codes and fly right in the front door. It is bold, Jace admitted. It is suicide, Valera corrected, but it is the only option we have. Suddenly, Valera stiffened. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. The hum of the station seemed to change pitch. She signaled for silence, her hand drifting to the hilt of her blade. What? Jace whispered. Someone is here, Valera breathed. She moved to the door, pressing her ear against the cold metal. She heard nothing. That was the problem. On a station like this, there was always noise, footsteps, shouting, machinery. Silence meant the area had been cleared. Silence meant a predator was nearby. Get back, she ordered. She kicked the door open and surged into the hallway, her blade igniting with a violet snap. Standing at the far end of the corridor, cloaked in the shadows of a flickering light strip, was a solitary figure. He wore the gray ceremonial armor of a Dominion High Commander. His cape was motionless. His hands were empty. Valera froze. She knew that silhouette. She knew the way he stood, balanced perfectly on the balls of his feet, ready to move in any direction instantly. Commander Sareth. He was the man who had trained her. He had taken her from the vats when she was 5, taught her to hold a knife, taught her to suppress her fear. He was the closest thing to a father she had ever known. And now he was here to kill her. Go! Valera hissed to Jace and Rin without looking back. Get to the ship. Valera! Jace started. Go! She roared. Jace grabbed Rin and pulled him back into the shadows of the room. Valera stepped forward, blocking the corridor. Commander, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hearts were hammering against her ribs. Sareth stepped into the light. He was old for a warrior, his face a map of scars and silver fur. His eyes, usually hard as flint, looked tired. Justicar, Sareth said. His voice was deep, gravelly. You have caused quite a stir. Valera, the council is in a panic. They say you have gone mad, that the human turned you. They are lying, Valera said. She raised her blade into a guard position. But you know that. You taught me to read the battlefield. You taught me to see what is not there. Sareth looked at her blade. He did not draw his own. I did, he said softly. I taught you to be a weapon, perfect, unyielding. I am not a weapon, Valera said. I am a person. And I know the truth. Sareth, the senator, was murdered by our own Black Ops. Drogon ordered it. He wants a war to justify annexing the border worlds. Sareth sighed. He looked down at his gloved hands. I know. Valera blinked. The guard dropped an inch. You know? I saw the reports, Sareth said. The real ones. Before they were scrubbed, I saw the weapons manifest from the depot on Karth 9. Then why are you here? Valera demanded. Why are you hunting me? Because I had to be the one to find you, Sareth said. He looked up, his eyes locking onto hers. If it were anyone else, Unit 4, or the Spectres, they would have vaporized this entire sector just to get you. I volunteered so I could talk to you. He took a step forward. Valera tensed, but he stopped. The council block behind Drogon is powerful. Valera. They have been orchestrating border attacks for months, burning villages, blaming humans. They need this war. Their economy depends on it. They are terrified of what you are carrying. The Truth Core, Valera said. Sareth nodded. If you bring that to the summit, you destroy them. But you also destroy the Dominion's reputation. We will be seen as monsters. The galaxy will never trust us again. Better to be hated for the truth than loved for a lie, Valera said. Sareth stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile touched his scarred lips. I told them you were stubborn, he said. I told them you were too smart for the conditioning to hold forever. He reached into his belt. Valera flinched, preparing to strike. But Sareth did not pull a weapon. He pulled a data chip. He tossed it through the air. Valera caught it with her free hand. What is this? She asked. Security protocols for the summit station, Sareth said. Patrol routes, sensor blind spots, shift changes. Valera stared at the chip, then back at him. She felt the world tilting on its axis. Why? She whispered. You are the commander. Loyalty is your life. Loyalty to the Dominion, Sareth corrected. Not to a gang of thieves and murderers in high towers. You were my best student, Valera. Not because you were the fastest or the strongest, but because you asked why. He stepped back into the shadows. Go, Valera. Win this. But know this. Once you step onto that station, there is no coming back. You win, or you die. I know, Valera said. Sareth nodded once, sharp and military. Then he turned and vanished into the darkness of the corridor. Valera stood there for a moment, clutching the chip. She felt a tear slide down her cheek, cool against her skin. She wiped it away angrily. Jason Ryn emerged from the room. Jace looked at her, his eyes wide. Was that? Did he just? He gave us the keys to the castle, Valera said. She pocketed the chip. Let us go. We have a summit to crash. The flight to the summit station was a blur of tension. They intercepted the Gornath diplomatic shuttle in deep space. Ryn handled the electronic warfare, jamming their distress beacon while Valera boarded and persuaded the diplomats to take an extended nap in the escape pods. Now, Valera stood in the small refresher unit of the shuttle, staring at her reflection. She had removed her heavy combat plates, wearing only the sleek black undersuit and a ceremonial robe they had found in the Gornath luggage. It was tight in the shoulders and too short in the sleeves. She looked ridiculous. She looked dangerous. She looked at her hands. They were large, scarred, designed for crushing and killing. Engineered, the voice in her head whispered. You are just biology written for violence. The door slid open. Jace stepped in. He was wearing a stiff, high-collared diplomat's tunic that made him look like a disgruntled waiter. We are docking in 10 minutes, he said. Rin is broadcasting the codes so far they are buying it. He looked at her in the mirror. He saw the doubt in her eyes. Hey, he said softly. Valera turned to face him. What if I cannot do it? She asked. Her voice was small, stripped of its armor. What if Sareth was right? What if I destroy everything? I was made to destroy. Jace, it is literally in my blood. Maybe I am just pointing the destruction in a different direction. Jace walked over to her. He took her hands in his. You were not just made, Valera. You were born. Maybe in a lab. Maybe with a purpose someone else chose. But you are here now. And you are making choices they never programmed. He ran his thumb over her knuckles. You are not a weapon, he said firmly. Weapons do not feel guilt. Weapons do not love. Valera looked at him sharply. Love? Jace froze. A flush crept up his neck. I mean, you know, care. About things. About justice. Valera stepped closer. The tension in the small room spiked, electric and heavy. Is that what this is? She asked. Justice? It starts with justice, Jace whispered. He looked at her mouth. Valera leaned down and kissed him. It was brief, hard, and desperate. It tasted of fear and hope. When we survive this, she said against his lips, we are going to talk about that word, deal, Jace said breathlessly. From the cockpit, Rin's voice squawked over the intercom. Attention, lovebirds. Please refrain from intense emotional bonding until we are on the ground. We are entering the docking bay. Try to look boring and bureaucratic. The interstellar Concord Summit Station was a marvel of engineering. It was a ring world in miniature, a rotating halo of glass and steel orbiting a neutral moon. Inside, the main concourse was a lush garden of imported flora, waterfalls, and floating platforms. Delegates from 100 worlds milled about in robes of silk and synthweave. Droids hovered with trays of drinks. The air smelled of expensive perfume and political stagnation. Valera. Jace. And Rin walked through the main airlock. Valera kept her head lowered, the hood of her robe obscuring her face. Jace walked beside her, clutching a briefcase that contained the truth core. Rin brought up the rear, carrying a stack of data pads and looking sufficiently harried. So many targets, Valera murmured, her eyes scanning the crowd. Her tactical HUD was going haywire, identifying security drones, hidden snipers, and undercover guards. Just keep walking, Jace muttered. We are the Gornath delegation. We are here to discuss agricultural tariffs on root vegetables. They reached the security checkpoint for the Grand Hall. A line of heavily armed Dominion Centurions stood guard, scanning every guest. Valera felt her muscles coil. She could take them. There were 6. She could snap the neck of the first one, take his rifle, suppress the others. No. No violence. Next. The lead Centurion barked. Jace stepped forward, holding out his credentials. Delegation Gornath, he said, forcing a smile. We are late. Very important vegetable business. The Centurion scanned the pass. He frowned. These codes are valid, he said, but your biometric scan is inconclusive. Please remove your hood. Madam. He pointed at Valera. Valera froze. If she removed the hood, the game was over. Her face was plastered on every bounty board in the quadrant. She tightened her grip on the hidden blade in her sleeve. I have a condition, Valera said, pitching her voice to a raspy whisper. Photosensitivity. The lights. They burn. The Centurion did not look impressed. Remove the hood, he commanded, his hand drifting to his stun baton. Valera prepared to move. She shifted her weight. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the catering station nearby. A service droid had spun out of control, spraying blue foam over a group of dignitaries. "My robes," a high-pitched voice screamed. Chaos erupted. Rin, standing behind Valyra, was frantically tapping on his wrist computer, a wicked grin on his face. "Oops," Rin whispered. "Glitch in the Matrix." The Centurion looked toward the commotion. "Check that out," he ordered his subordinate. He turned back to Valyra, distracted. "Fine. Go through, but keep the hood down inside." Valyra exhaled. They walked through the scanner. "Nice work," she whispered to Rin. "I do what I can," Rin said. "I also programmed the music system to play polkas in 10 minutes. It will really set the mood." They moved into the grand hall. It was a colossal amphitheater. In the center, a podium floated on a beam of light. Around it, hundreds of floating pods held the representatives of the galaxy. On the central screen, a Dominion counselor was speaking. It was Drogon. He was tall, lean, and radiated arrogance. "The time for patience is over," Drogon shouted, his voice amplified to shake the walls. "The human terrorists have struck our borders again. They have attacked our supply lines. They have murdered our senators. We must authorize a full annexation of the frontier zone." "For peace," the crowd murmured. Some cheered, some booed. "We need to get to the transmission hub," Jace said. "It is under the podium." They moved through the shadows of the lower tier. Sareth's chip guided them. They bypassed 2 sensor grids and a locked maintenance door. They reached the hub. It was a small room filled with blinking server racks. Jace opened the briefcase and took out the truth core. "Plug it in," Valyra said. "Rin, guard the door." Jace connected the core to the main terminal. "Uploading," he said. 60 seconds to override the broadcast. Valyra watched the progress bar. 50%. 60. Suddenly, the door blew inward. Valyra was thrown back by the concussive force. She hit the server rack, sparks raining down on her. Through the smoke, 4 Dominion Black Ops soldiers entered. They were sleek, silent, and lethal. And leading them was Drogon himself. He held a disruptor pistol, his face twisted in a sneer. "I knew you would come," he said smoothly. "Sareth has a sentimental streak. I tracked his shuttle logs." He aimed the pistol at the terminal. "Step away from the console. Human." Jace stood his ground, shielding the upload. "It is too late, Drogon," Jace said. "The truth is already in the system." Drogon laughed. "Truth is whatever I say it is." He fired. The shot did not hit Jace. It hit the server rack next to him. The explosion sent Jace flying across the room. He hit the wall and slid down, unconscious. "Jace!" Valyra screamed. She lunged. She did not use a weapon. She was pure fury. She closed the distance to Drogon in a single bound. The Black Ops soldiers opened fire. Valyra took 3 plasma bolts to the chest plate. The armor held, but the heat seared her skin. She ignored it. She grabbed Drogon by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "Call them off," she roared. Drogon choked, clawing at her hand. "You lose, Justicar." He tapped a control on his wrist. Above them, in the grand hall, a massive explosion rocked the station. The ceiling of the hub room buckled. Dust and debris rained down. "What did you do?" Valyra hissed. Drogon smiled, his teeth stained with blood. "A bomb," he wheezed. "In the human delegation's pod, I just detonated it." Valyra's blood ran cold. The alarms in the station began to wail. "Attention," the automated voice screamed. "Terrorist attack detected. Origin, human coalition sector. All security units engage. War protocols initiated." Drogon laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. "See?" he gasped. "Now, everyone believes." Valyra threw him across the room. He hit the far wall and crumpled. She scrambled over to Jace. He was groaning, blood trickling from his ear. "Jace, get up," she pleaded. She shook him. "We have to go." Jace blinked his eyes open. He looked at the ceiling, where the sounds of screaming and secondary explosions were filtering down. Did we win?" he asked weakly. Valera looked at the terminal. The upload was paused at 99%. The server was smoking. "No," she whispered. "We failed." The door to the hub room burst open again. This time, it was not Black Ops. It was Sareth. He looked at the scene. The destroyed server. The unconscious Jace. The chaos. "Valera!" Sareth shouted. "You have to leave. Now! They are venting this sector." Valera hauled Jace to his feet. She looked at Sareth. "He did it," she said, her voice breaking. "Drogan, he bombed the summit." "I know," Sareth said grimly. He leveled his rifle at the Black Ops soldiers who were recovering from Valera's assault. "Go! I will hold them." Valera hesitated. "Sareth! Go!" the old commander roared. "Live to fight another day!" Valera grabbed Rin, who was cowering under a desk, and threw Jace's arm over her shoulder. She dragged them out the back exit, into the maintenance tunnels. Behind them. She heard the sound of Sareth's rifle firing, steady and rhythmic, until it was drowned out by the roar of the station tearing itself apart. They reached the shuttle. Rin fired the engines before the ramp was even closed. As they peeled away from the station, Valera looked out the viewport. The summit station was burning. A massive hole had been blown in the side of the ring. Debris spiraled out into space. And on the comms channels, 1,000 voices were screaming for vengeance. Human terrorists. The news feeds were already chanting. Attack on the summit. War declared. Valera sank into the co-pilot's seat. She looked at Jace, who was slumped against the bulkhead, clutching his head. She looked at her hands. They were shaking. The galaxy was on fire, and they were the ones holding the match. The summit station was not just burning, it was screaming. The explosion in the human coalition wing had torn a jagged structural wound in the side of the great orbital ring. Atmosphere vented into the void in violent, silent plumes of white crystal. Inside the grand hall, the air was a choking haze of smoke, pulverized drywall, and the acrid stench of terrified biology. Hundreds of delegates from a dozen species were scrambling over the overturned floating pods. The gravity stabilizers were failing, causing the room to tilt sickeningly to the left. The screaming was a cacophony of different languages, all begging for the same thing: survival. Through the hole in the station's flank, a battered Gornoth diplomatic shuttle wove through the debris field. It did not turn away toward the safety of the jump points. It banked hard, its thrusters flaring with desperate blue intensity, and aimed directly for the breach in the hull. Rin wrestled with the yoke, his forearms moving in a blur across the controls. "This is a terrible idea," Rin shouted over the roar of the engines. "Statistically, this is the worst idea I have ever had. And I once tried to juggle plasma grenades." "Just get us inside the chamber," Jace yelled from the co-pilot seat. Valera stood behind them, bracing herself against the bulkhead. She had wiped the blood from her armor, but the scorch marks from the plasma bolts remained. Her eyes were fixed on the approaching inferno of the grand hall. "Do it, Rin," she commanded. The shuttle screamed through the jagged opening of the hull. Metal shrieked against metal as the landing gear sheared off. The vessel skidded across the polished floor of the upper balcony, plowing through a row of decorative statues before slamming to a halt, teetering on the edge of the central pit. The ramp hissed open. Valera Kor stepped out into the chaos. She did not look like a diplomat anymore. The Gornoth robe was torn away, revealing the blackened, battle-scarred Justicar armor beneath. She looked like an avatar of war rising from the ashes. Jace was right beside her. The truth core clutched in his hand like a grenade. The hall fell into a stunned, terrified silence. The delegates froze. The security drones hovered, uncertain of their targeting parameters amidst the confusion. On the central podium, which still floated defiantly above the wreckage, stood High Counselor Vane. He was the most powerful man in the Dominion, an aristocrat draped in white and gold, his face a mask of cold, imperious fury. He was the one who had signed Vylera's commendations. He was the one who had called her the perfect blade. "There she is," Vane's voice boomed over the emergency speakers. "The traitor. The butcher who bombed this station. Kill her." A squad of Praetorian guards, the elite of the elite, encased in gold armor, moved to intercept them on the balcony. Vylera did not flinch. She activated the external speakers on her suit. "I did not set that bomb." "Vane!" she shouted. Her voice cut through the panic, resonant and undeniable. "And you know it?" Vane laughed. It was a sound devoid of humor. "Does it matter? Justicar? Look at them." He gestured to the cowering delegates. "They are afraid. Fear needs a monster. And we built you to be the best monster in the galaxy." Vane tapped a command on his podium. A holographic projection flared to life above the chamber, dwarfing the chaos. It showed footage from Vylera's past, the Battle of Hether, the Siege of the Pale Moon. It showed her unit moving with lethal efficiency, slaughtering enemies. "You think you are a hero?" Vane sneered. "You think those battles were real?" Vylera paused. The footage showed her driving a vibroblade into a masked insurgent. "Hether was a rebellion," she said. "We stopped a massacre." "Hether was a stage play," Vane shouted. "The insurgents were starving colonists we paid to hold weapons. We drugged them to make them fight. We sent your unit in to slaughter them so we could film it, so we could show the galaxy that the Dominion brings order." Vylera felt the floor drop out from under her. "The Siege of Pale Moon?" Vane continued, his voice dripping with venom. "Holographic targets. Controlled demolitions? You and your squad were dancing to a script. Vylera. We engineered your victories to sell war bonds. You are not a warrior. You are a prop. A very expensive, genetically modified action figure." Vylera staggered back. The weight of the words hit her harder than any physical blow. Her memories, the adrenaline, the pride, the feeling of protecting her people, curdled into something violently sick. It was all a lie. Her discipline, her honor, it was just content for a propaganda machine. She looked at her hands. They were trembling. "I am nothing," she whispered. Jace stepped in front of her. He grabbed her shoulder, his grip tight and painful. "Vylera, look at me." She looked up, her golden eyes wide and vacant. "Do not listen to him," Jace said fiercely. "He made me." "Jace," she said, her voice cracking. "He wrote my life. He built the tank," Jace shouted, shaking her. "He built the armor and he wrote the mission parameters. But he did not tell you to save the archivists in the vault. He did not tell you to spare the extremists in the canyon. He did not tell you to spare me." Jace pointed at the podium. "He wrote the script for the weapon. But the weapon went off script. The choices you made when no one was watching? Those are yours. That is who you are." Vylera stared at him. She saw the fierce belief in his eyes. He knew every dark thing she was capable of. And he was still standing there. "You are not his prop," Jace said, softening his voice. "You are my partner. Now stand up." Vylera took a breath. It was a shuddering, ragged thing. But as she exhaled, the trembling stopped. The cold, hard clarity of the hunt returned. But this time, it was not cold. It was burning. She straightened her spine. She looked at Vane. "You are right, Counselor," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the acoustics of the room carried it to every ear. She stepped toward the edge of the balcony. You trained me to chase enemies. You built my legs to run them down. You sharpened my mind to find their weaknesses. She drew her twin vibroblades. They ignited with a hum that sounded like a judgment. But you made a mistake, Vayne. You taught me to hunt the threats to the Dominion. She pointed a blade at him. And I have found the threat. Vayne's sneer faltered. Kill her, he screamed to the Praetorians. The gold-armored guards charged. Jace, the core, Valira shouted. She launched herself off the balcony. She did not aim for the guards. She aimed for the space between them. She landed in a crouch, the impact cracking the floor tiles. As the Praetorians opened fire, she moved. This was not the staged combat of Hether. This was desperate, messy, real survival. Valira spun, deflecting plasma bolts with the flat of her blades. She swept the leg of the first guard, sending him crashing into the second. Jace sprinted for the central control pillar at the base of the podium. Rin was providing cover fire from the shuttle's turret, sending warning shots that kept the other security teams pinned down. Valira became a shield. She placed herself between the Praetorians and Jace. She took a hit to her shoulder plate, then another to her thigh. She grunted but did not yield ground. My legs were made for battle, she roared, parrying a vibro spear thrust. She drove her shoulder into the attacker, knocking him back, and for hunting the truth. Jace reached the terminal. He slammed the truth core into the override slot. Broadcast, he screamed. The giant holographic screen above them flickered. The image of Vayne's propaganda reel distorted, dissolved, and was replaced. The Grand Hall gasped. The image was clear. It was a recording from the senator's private office. It showed High Counselor Vayne handing a data pad to a Black Ops assassin. It showed the weapons manifest. It showed the transfer of funds to the Human Liberty Front. And then, audio played. Vayne's voice, crisp and undeniable. Kill Kalen. Make it look like the human spy. We need the outrage to justify the fleet mobilization. The annexation will make us trillions. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Vayne stood on his podium, staring at his own face on the screen. He looked small. He looked exposed. The Praetorians stopped fighting. They looked up at the screen, then at Vayne, then at Valira, who stood bleeding and defiant in the center of the floor. Lies, Vayne screamed, his voice cracking. Deep fakes, terrorist tricks. He pulled a hidden disruptor pistol from his robes. He aimed it not at Valira but at Jace. If I cannot have the war, I will have the satisfaction. Valira saw the motion. She was 20 feet away. Too far to strike, but she was not too far to run. She pushed off the ground with every ounce of strength in her engineered muscles. She moved faster than she had ever moved in the simulations. She became a blur of silver and black. Vayne fired. Valira slid across the floor, throwing her body in front of Jace. The disruptor beam hit her chest plate. It was a weapon designed to disintegrate tank armor. Valira screamed as the energy cooked the biocomposite. The force of the impact lifted her off her feet and threw her backward into Jace. They both crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs. Valira, Jace shouted. Smoke rose from her chest. The armor was fused and cracked, glowing red hot. Vayne raised the gun for a second shot, but he never took it. A heavy stun baton slammed into the back of his head. Vayne crumpled. Standing behind him was the captain of the Praetorian Guard. The captain looked at the unconscious counselor, then down at Valira. He deactivated his baton. The guard serves the Dominion, the captain said, his voice amplified. Not the council. He looked at the delegates. Arrest the conspirators. All of them. Pandemonium erupted, but this time it was the chaotic noise of justice. Thoraxi and human security forces moved together, detaining the members of Vayne's block. Medics rushed onto the floor. Jace was frantically trying to detach Valira's breastplate. "Come on, come on, do not die on me," he pleaded. His hands were shaking. Valira gasped, her eyes fluttering open. She grabbed his wrist. "Stop," she wheezed. "It did not go through." Jace ripped the smoking plate away. The undersuit was singed, and there was a nasty burn on her skin, but she was alive. "You idiot," Jace breathed, collapsing back onto his heels. "You absolute heroic idiot. You used your face to block a disruptor beam." "My chest, actually," Valira corrected weakly. "It is thicker." She tried to sit up, but groaned. "Stay down," Jace said, putting a hand on her shoulder. "We won. Look." Valira looked up. The screen was still playing the Truth Corps records. The delegates were shaking hands. The Praetorians were marching Vayne away in irons. For the first time in her life, the violence had stopped, and the silence that followed was not empty. It was full of hope. 3 days later, the observation deck of the repair station offered a view of the stars that was unobstructed by debris or smoke. Valera stood by the window, wearing civilian clothes, a simple tunic and trousers that felt strange and light on her skin. Her arm was in a sling, and she walked with a slight limp, but she was healing. The genetic engineering that had made her a weapon was now knitting her back together with remarkable speed. Jace walked up beside her. He held 2 cups of steaming calf. He handed one to her. "Black, no sugar. Just like your soul," he teased. Valira took the cup, a small smile touching her lips. "My soul is currently undergoing renovations," she said. "How did the hearing go?" Jace asked. Valera sighed, looking out at the stars. "Complicated. The Interstellar Concord has granted me full asylum. They offered me a position as a security consultant. The new Dominion Provisional Government offered to reinstate my rank, with back pay and a medal." "And?" Jace asked. "And I told them both to kindly file their offers in the nearest waste reclamation unit." Jace laughed, a bold diplomatic strategy. "So, what is the plan?" Valira turned to look at him. "I do not know," she admitted. "For 30 years, I have had a mission every hour of every day. Now, I have nothing. You have a ship," Jace pointed out. "Rin fixed the shuttle. He painted flames on the side. I told him it was tacky, but he said it improves aerodynamics." Valira chuckled. "And I have a partner?" she asked softly. Jace stepped closer. He took her uninjured hand. "You have a partner," he confirmed. "And that partner has a lead on a colony world in the Outer Rim. One of the places the corporations tried to strip mine. They need help rebuilding. They need someone who knows how to defend a perimeter, and someone who knows how to fix water purifiers." Valira looked at him. The romantic tension that had fueled their chase was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer the frantic spark of adrenaline. It was a steady flame. She leaned her forehead against his. "I am done with war, Jace," she whispered. "I know," Jace said. "But peace is hard work. Valira, it is harder than fighting. It requires patience. It requires compromise. And it requires us to be something other than soldiers. Can we be that?" Valira asked. Jace kissed her. It was slow, deliberate, and full of a quiet, unshakable promise. "We can try," he said. Valira pulled back and looked into his eyes. She saw her reflection there, not as a weapon, not as a predator, but as a woman who had chosen her own name. Strength, she realized, was not about being unbreakable. It was about breaking and putting yourself back together in a new shape. It was about the humility to admit you were wrong, and the courage to let someone else inside the armor. She looked out at the vast open galaxy. "The Outer Rim," she said. "Do they have apples there?" Jace smiled. Real ones. Crunchy. Sweet. Then let us go, Valera said. She turned from the window, her hand firmly in his. They walked toward the hangar bay, leaving the politics and the tribunals behind. They walked with the easy, synchronized stride of equals. The hunt was over. The life had just begun.